Hi, I'm John DeDakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with Katie Anthony. There she is looking at her phone. No, you're not. You recovered very quickly. I'm
I sure
impressed.
did.
Let me just read your bio very quickly because it's nice and to the point, and yet I'm sure that there's going to be a lot that we can talk about. Katie Anthony writes about feminism and family. She's had bylines with CNN, NBC News, Think, Bust, Scary Mommy, The Big Smoke, Upworthy, The Good Men Project, and other outlets. And you can find her regularly at her blog, KatyKatieKate. She lives outside Seattle with her husband and her two sons. Katie, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's nice
So,
to have an adult conversation.
how old are your kids?
6 and 8. They both just turned 6 and 8.
Nice, very nice. A boy and a girl, or
Boys.
two boys? That's a handful. Boys are a lot different than girls, aren't they?
They are and they aren't, John. They are, yeah, everything is a weapon right now for my 6-year-old. And my 8-year-old is a voracious reader, as I was when I was a kid. It's really interesting, when you become a parent, there's this vision that you have of parenting, that you're going to be having these soulful conversations with your children and really sculpting their minds and their morals and how they're going to move through the world. And then you have like 10 years of front-loaded just keeping them alive before you start doing any of that.
Exactly. And you mentioned the weaponry. We had our firstborn was a girl, and 2.5 years later, our son James was born. And the thing that surprised my wife is that, Emily, books, that's what she was totally enthralled with. James would take a bite out of a sandwich and then go bang.
Totally. Yep.
And
Yep.
we didn't have guns in the house or anything like that, didn't watch violent stuff. There's a gun gene.
It's so funny. When I found out that I was pregnant with my second son, I called my grandmother who had 3 boys, and she laughed like a lot on the phone, like more than was really nice. It wasn't a celebratory laugh. She was like, ha, 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 you don't know what it's about. And she said, just remember, with little boys, everything's a gun. And so, and that's true with my 6-year-old for sure. You should have seen, he learned how to make an Amazon wish list, how to add things to his Amazon wish list the other day. And I went in and there were like 2,000 items on his Amazon wish list. And it was like toy gun, toy gun, toy gun, toy machete, toy boomerang, toy cannon, toy gun, toy gun. It was like, what?
Well, so how do you as a mom deal with this?
Well, I'm still working my way through it. I don't have an answer for you yet. Because on the one hand, I don't really believe in shutting down your kids' instincts or interests. I think if they're interested in it, then it deserves your attention. I also think that guns are not toys, and guns are very, very dangerous tools. We always we draw a distinction in our house between toys and tools. And so when, we have a laser tag set that we bought when the quarantine started, and it has a little chest plate and a little toy gun, and you run around and pew, pew, pew. But as for now, we don't have any guns that shoot projectiles. We only have the laser tag guns that shoot lights. And you're only allowed to shoot at people when they're playing. You're not allowed to shoot at anybody who's not playing, because it can be scary. And that's basically the level of conversation we're having at the house, that guns are tools, not toys. And if you're playing with this laser tag thing, you have to play with somebody who's agreed to play with you, because a lot of people find guns to be very, very scary for good reason, because they're
do your boys get that? Are they pretty responsive to the way you're approaching them so far?
Definitely. I think they are a couple of jokesters, but I have a pretty good mom voice for when it is serious.
How does that mom voice sound?
It's deeper than, and it's
Can you demonstrate?
Much quieter. John, look at my face.
I'm looking at
about this right now. It's very like It's not a big voice. It's like laser focused. I've got you in my tractor beams, and you're not going anywhere until we've had this conversation.
Wow.
Flow,
Well,
flow.
you're very intimidating.
I am. I've got the big eye.
So, how are you handling the whole COVID thing?
I think both fine and not awesome, but I'll be the first one to tell you that I have gone up on my Zoloft prescription since the quarantine started. My anxiety needed a little extra smoothing, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic when there were so many unknowns. I mean, there still are so many unknowns. At the same time, I'm so aware of how lucky I am and how safe we are in a lot of ways. We live in a place where it's really easy to socially distance. We live in a place where we can drive and pick up our groceries with contactless curbside pickup. We don't have to, I'm not an essential worker. My husband's not an essential worker. So we can really manage our exposure in a way that is an incredible privilege to us. And it really reminds me of, I was actually in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. And the way that COVID has been kind of rolling through our lives, it reminds me a lot of Hurricane Katrina, because on the one hand, for my experience, it was a cataclysmic disruption of my entire life. And on the other hand, I got in my car and I drove out of the city and I couldn't get back to my house for 7 months. And so I lived at my parents' house again and was safe and fed and clothed, and all of my needs were met. And so there's this kind of ping pong thing that happens in your brain when you are both in distress because the order of the world has been disrupted, and you are also intensely grateful and aware of how much order still exists in your world and how much control you do still have and how many gifts and blessings you do still have. So it's like, it's back and forth. It's like, oh, this is terrible. Oh, we're so lucky. Oh, this is terrible.
Right. Well, and right now there's a big discussion about going back to school,
Right.
and Trump wants the schools open. A lot of local officials are going, not so fast. And even though if schools aren't open, there's a question of the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in terms of Wi-Fi to even be able to online learn. So now, how are you coming down on the whole back to school thing?
We're doing distance learning. Right now, our school district is still planning to open for in-person education in the fall, but 2 neighboring school districts in Washington have already announced that they will not be doing any in-person learning in the fall. So, to the extent that we will have the choice in the fall, we have already opted out of the classroom.
Now, we should clarify Washington State as opposed
correct.
to DC, correct?
Washington State, yes. And I think the main, I agonized over this, John. I agonized over it because I am so concerned about the social emotional development of young children right now. I think there's a lot that we're going to have to answer for and deal with. I mean, no childhood is trauma free. No kid gets out undented from their childhood. But at the same time, it does feel like we need the normalcy, we need the routine. I love teachers. I love our public school. I adore the other kids in the class. It is so, so important to me, especially my kids are in elementary school. They must learn how to be a member of a community that I am not a part of. They must learn that. That is the number one thing. I don't care about times tables. I don't care about reading and writing. You need to learn how to be a decent human being. Wait your turn, be aware of the needs of other people and where you stand in that hierarchy, because you are not always going to be number 1 or number 2 on the hierarchy list the way you often are in a small family. But at the same time, our family has the luxury of, I'm a writer, so I can really sculpt my work time around the kids' academic commitments. My husband has been lucky enough to be able to work from home, so he can often cover if there's something that I need to do, like right now. But
you definitely need to do this. Yes.
It's very important, honey. Very important. But my concern was there are kids in our district who don't have enough food at home, who maybe home is not a safe place for them, who are in single parent households. Both parents have to go to work, and we're not in that position. So if we can remove ourselves and just say, like, let's make more space and make available more resources for the kids who do need them and for the families who do really need them, why on earth wouldn't we do that? And if anyone is going to have to shoulder an upset in the expected school year, it should be the people who have the most privilege and freedom to do that, like me.
So are you optimistic in terms of where we're going in terms of the fall and school?
I wouldn't say I'm optimistic.
I've read your blog.
No, yeah. I'm a realist. I would be shocked if the school stays open more than a month. I don't think it's possible. I think with the spread of the pandemic right now, it's just someone in the district is going to test positive, and then it's going to be shut down again. And we just thought, you know what, let's just own that we're not going to be in the classroom, and we can start getting set up for what a homeschooling situation, distance learning, is going to look like.
I want to switch gears just a little bit and pick up on something that you mentioned about raising two boys and helping them to realize that they're not the center of the universe, and help them to be responsible and all of that. And of course, you're a feminist blogger. And the Me Too movement has changed everything, and it's very controversial. It's very cathartic in a lot of ways. You have been very outspoken in your blog in terms of the way men behave. So I guess just in general sense, do you get a sense over the last couple of years, are men starting to get it?
I don't know. I really don't know. So I think we have to draw a very clear line between public behavior and private attitude shift. Because I do think that in some situations, the threat of consequence for acting like a total douchebag has lessened the douchebaggery. I think absolutely that is true. People are terrified of being canceled. People are terrified of being fired. I think in some situations that has led to safer workplaces. I think in some situations that's led to safer public spaces. In other situations, it has just led to more insular male spaces where women are excluded because they're dangerous, because they could accuse them of something, and we can't have that at all. But beyond all of the public behavior shift, I honestly don't know how much the internal shift has happened, the kind of growth, the extension of empathy to seeing women as fully human has happened.
How will you know when that's happened? Let's assume that it does happen. What are you looking for that will make you more confident that guys are getting it?
I'm looking for better apologies. I am looking for...
What do you mean?
The apologies that you see from public figures predominantly that are still been churned through a PR machine and are still, I'm sorry you felt hurt, and are still, it was never my intention to, all of those apologies are still completely centered on you defending your character as a good guy who would never hurt anybody.
Let me just ask a sort of a devil's advocate question. Isn't there also, though, a legal consequence to actually making an apology that's in a sense an admission of guilt that really could end up having you in the slammer? Isn't that an understandable reason why a guy, may hedge on the apology?
I think if a guy is that worried about legal consequences, he should not be doing shit he needs to apologize for. I mean, that's, to me, the ass covering is just, it's such a transparent admission of guilt that even if your lawyer has advised you to make some kind of malarkey statement that is completely meaningless, it to me just says, yeah, I know I did this. And I'm not really sorry for it. So yeah, I think better accountability, better apologies, people making things right before they're caught, people changing systems before a lawsuit happens. I think more proactive changes in public spaces and in the workplace will help. But as far as, in our homes and private spaces, it's difficult to measure, what happens behind closed doors. This is America. We're fiercely protective of our private spaces and our personal freedoms. And so it is incredibly hard to know how intimate relationships and families and homes are doing, beyond the sometimes statistics that we get often in the context of a greater social change, like with COVID, where we're seeing study after study after study after survey show that women are being fired at higher rates than men are from the workplace. Women are also being asked to take up far more domestic responsibility, even if they work full time in a straight partnership. Women are homeschooling their kids, even if they work full time, at far greater rates than men who are partnered with those women. So, those are not particularly encouraging snapshots, little peeks that we get into the private lives of men and women.
Well, and the male-female relationships are fraught just, I think, almost by definition. And I mean, I can remember, how difficult it was when I was a teenager and young adult, striking up a relationship or a conversation even, with a woman, how daunting that was. And now, and you sort of alluded to this, now it's almost as if you make any kind of an overture, you're running the risk of getting, nailed for, some sort of inappropriate action. My question.
I don't agree, actually, John. I think if you don't know how to flirt without coming across as threatening, you probably need to go get some therapy.
Well, that's my point. I don't think guys know how to do that. I mean, let me give you one example from a friend of mine at CNN long ago, a very attractive young woman, and her marriage was breaking up. And she said to me, "I always fall for the bad boys." And I remember asking her, "Well, why do you do that?" And, she stopped and was stunned. And she thought for a minute and she said, "I think they're the only guys who have the confidence to approach me," which I found particularly interesting. And she wasn't being arrogant. She was being, I think, matter of fact. It's the confidence factor, which, the bad boys have confidence, but they're mean. But you don't have to be a mean person to have confidence. I guess my question is, flirting takes a certain degree of, I don't know, risk taking, because you don't know how the other person's going to handle it. And so being playful and bantering is something that can be enjoyable, but it can also cross the line. It's a nuanced kind of thing. So help the guys who are watching understand how to do this in a way that's respectful.
So I think the first thing you have to always think about is context, because women, when we are approached by men, I will speak for myself and most of the women I know, our number one concern is safety. Or am I safe in this situation? So if it's the two of you alone on a train, it's not a safe situation. Do not approach her. I don't care if you think she might be the love of your life. Take a chance and post a misconnection. Seriously, it is going to scare her. If you're in a bar and you're with friends and there's lots of people around, it's a lot safer. So, being aware of her perception of the situation. Don't approach women in parking lots. Don't walk up behind a woman who can't see you and introduce yourself. I mean, these are all things that seem basic, but at the same time, the situational awareness isn't there, not because, again, you're not a bad person, but because you've never been asked to be aware like that. In a patriarchy, in many ways, what we're looking at is a predator-prey situation. And that's also kind of our typical romantic dynamic that we see in a lot of classic romantic stories, is like the man stalks, the woman resists, he finally catches her, and we're supposed to be like, oh, and it's not in real life. It is scary and creepy when someone keeps coming after you after you've said no many times. So that's the first thing I would say. Start to develop your situational awareness and ask yourself, would I be comfortable if someone twice my size did this to me right now?
What about vocabulary in terms of what the guy says?
Oh Lord, I haven't been single in a little while. I mean, honestly, I'm probably super old school, but just like a hello, how are you? I mean, I wouldn't lead with compliments about an appearance or a body or like a sexual.
Why not? Why not?
Because that's kind of the story all the time for women.
What do you mean?
That's what we're valued for by and large, not only by strangers, but by the media, by pop culture. We are like predominantly valuable for the way we look and the way we can make other people feel good by just being present and well put together. So leading with that, I'm not saying I don't like a compliment if I feel good. What I am saying is that if you start there, it's pretty transparent that that's all you're really interested in. And every single woman out there, I don't care how hot she is, has a lot more to offer than how she looks. So to me, like personally, that's a turnoff to lead with some kind of observation about your body, your face, your hair, whatever. Like don't just start getting to know her as a human being. Stop thinking of her as an object that you're rating and finding pleasing. Just understand who she is as a human being a little bit. It's a bar. I'm not a little bit.
Okay. Tell me more about your blog. How did that come about?
So funny. So it's called KatyKatieKate. I started the blog when my first son was about 6 months old. And he was in the middle of a sleep regression, and I was not handling it well. I was pretty strung out, and I walked out of his bedroom from putting him down for a nap, which he was screaming through. And I went to my computer, and I went to Blogger, and I was like, start a blog. And I thought, what should I call it? And the first thing that came into my mind was Tony. And so
why?
I wrote, Katie, I have no idea. I'm not a super fan. It was a strange mental leap, but I just wrote Katie. But I obviously didn't have the little accent over the E. And so I wrote that blog for about a year before I shared it with anybody. It was really just my journal. And it was predominantly about parenting. You could call it a mommy blog. It was about kind of the really difficult transformation that I went through from being a woman without children who was, a sex object, who was supposed to be relevant and productive and funny and appealing. And then I became a mom and I was irrelevant. I was invisible. People thought I was stupid or simple or unambitious or uninteresting, especially when they found out that I didn't go back to my call center job after my son was born because the childcare would have cost more than I made. So I was like, no, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And they're like, oh, got it.
So it's KatyKatieKate. Why Katy, Kati?
Well, because of Tony, to be honest, to be completely honest with you. Now, over time, I've come up with a better answer, which is...
It's a typo. Just admit it.
Not a typo. No, it's just that there are lots of different ways to spell the name Katie or Kate, and that the blog is primarily about how a person should be lots of things. A person should not just be one thing ever. And so even though that story arrived several years after the name of the blog, it's my story, I'm sticking with it.
Okay. And I should read, what I'd like to do is to read just the first couple of paragraphs from your blog that just outlines who you are. It starts out by saying, I'm Katie Anthony. I live outside Seattle with my kids Chicken, 6, and Buster, 4,
I
not their
love
real names because hashtag the internet. What is this blog? KatyKatieKate is about feminism, family, and other F words. But don't get it twisted. This isn't a bless your heart mommy blog, and it isn't a burn this motherfucker to the ground screed mill. KatyKatieKate is about parents who are still people too, exhilarated, furious, hanging on people who laugh inappropriately and lose their shit and find themselves saying, sure, fine, go play in the bees if that's what you want most. KatyKatieKate is a blog about feminism and social justice. So I think, and I've read it a few times, and I think that pretty much sums it up.
Oh, good.
Was the voice hard? I mean, this is the way you talk, right?
This is the way I talk. Yeah, no, the voice was not hard. And I think one of the things I will occasionally get a friend or an aspiring writer say, I want to start a blog. What are your tips for starting a blog? And I will say, first, you have to write about what you're incredibly curious about, because any kind of open-ended creative endeavor has got to be powered by bottomless curiosity and kind of self-rewarding in that way, because a blog can go on forever. It's not like you're ever going to reach the finish line of the blog necessarily. And I think writing it for a year as a diary helped me understand that I could put my own voice out into the world without worrying if it was fancy enough or polished enough or profound enough, that it was enough to just be my voice.
Was it scary? Was it scary to post it publicly for the first time?
It wasn't, because I had a friend who had just had a baby, and I had a blog post that I had written kind of to myself about one of the issues that she said she was having with her baby. And so I thought, oh, maybe this would help her. It was the first time that I thought, like, I have information I can share about the time that I was in the weeds and in the trenches and feeling the same way. And from that point, it became clear to me that it was not just, I think storytelling is such a powerful bridge. We were talking about creating empathy and that internal shift that can happen to turn anti-feminists into feminists, to turn unintentional racists into active anti-racists. You have to build that bridge of empathy, of really coming to see another person's full humanity. And storytelling is such a huge part of that. So I really started to understand that just by putting your story out there and saying, I'm going to take up space with some of my words here, it is possible to create relationships and help people feel seen and feel seen yourself when you think, like, am I the only person out here who gets really angry at this?
So what kind of feedback have you gotten?
Oh, goodness. Oh, there's a range. There's a range of feedback. Gotten my fair share of, fuck off and die, you stupid cunt. Not about my kids. Those are not usually about my kids' posts. Although I've been writing about my kids less and less, because as the blog has gotten a wider readership, and as my kids have gotten older, I ask them before I write about them now. And then, there have been times that people have just come through with real unsolicited parenting advice that, gosh, that puts my hackles up. Sometimes I just want to talk about my kids. I don't need you to tell me how to fix my kids. I don't need.
How many followers do you have?
Oh, goodness. I have about 10,000 on Facebook. And then I think 5,000 on Twitter, and Instagram is lagging behind because I don't understand Instagram.
Well, is it a surprise to you that there are so many people interested in what you have to say?
On some level, yes. I think one of the things that I grew up believing about myself was that I wasn't special, or that I had to be the smartest person in the room in order to deserve to speak. And that, again, that mental process of coming to accept that it's okay to take up space with your own voice, because you have value as a person. Your stories have value as your stories. So there are times that I'm still very surprised, especially when, like, somebody reaches out and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you on my show, or hey, I'd like to interview you on my podcast, or I'd like you to write me 600 words about this current event. It's always an incredible surprise. And I don't mind admitting that I have a touch of imposter syndrome lurking around the edges there. But my sister actually gave me some amazing advice about imposter syndrome. She said, you should be thankful for imposter syndrome, because that is what told you never to settle for it's fine. It is what pushes you to keep doing a great job and keep reaching for just the right story to tell in just the right way. But sometimes it's okay to say, I don't need you right now. I don't need that voice right now. I'm good. I'm happy with what I've achieved. And so I really appreciate that perspective, because I think people tend to tell women we're doing life wrong. We put many exclamation points in our emails. We say just too much. We say sorry too much. We smile too much. We don't smile enough. We're too cold. We're too flirty. We're, all of these things. And I think imposter syndrome is one of those things that people use. Like, don't think of yourself as an imposter. Well, why not? It's okay. It's okay to be a little bit unbelieving sometimes, disbelieving that I'm lucky enough to be heard on this.
Well, and this is, we've never met before. This is the first time we've ever talked. And so, I really don't know you, but I'm interested in finding out, in terms of your upbringing, what what your day job was before you got married, the balance between, having kids and, making money. And I think probably more than anything, I'm interested in learning, because I have a lot of friends who are millennials who are trying to figure it out. And of course, with the economy the way it is, COVID, millennials just in general are looked down upon. This is a daunting time to be a young person. And so how did you learn how to be a woman and be yourself? You know what I mean? To have your own power and not to give it away, and yet at the same time not to be so antagonistic that you don't know how to be able to build bridges and relationships. I know that I'm not really. This is a bad interview question because I haven't focused it, but there's a lot of stuff for you to unpack there.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. Use both sides of the page. To the first part of your question, which is how did I learn how to kind of be a woman and make space for myself and take up that space? The answer is it's for as long as I have, that's my son, by the way, for as long as I have learned or have been working on learning how to stop apologizing for taking up space, how to demand that I be paid what is fair for my work. I have been struggling to believe in myself for longer. So it is a constant uphill battle when it comes to having that pep talk with myself and creating the sense of worthiness with myself. How does it happen? Well, first, therapy. Honestly, just a lot of therapy, because there's so much unlearning that has to happen. My son is banging on the door. I don't know if you can hear him. That's okay. That's life.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much unlearning that has to happen, because from a very young age, and this is something that, again, I wish more men understood about women, and more people understood about people who are different from them.
You can let him in if you want. Oh my. While Katie is answering the door, we're talking to Katie Anthony, who's a feminist blogger, and her blog is KatyKatieKate. She lives in the Seattle area, and there she is again.
Back.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah, my 8-year-old was circling the office, finding different surfaces to knock on. So back to your question, I think it is it's something I wish more people understood, more men understood about women, is that everything that you think of as a punchline about women, how long it takes us to get dressed, or how fixated we can be on having a tidy home, or how much we love yogurt. You know, anything that you think of as a punchline about women is a scar that is a place where a culture told us that we weren't good enough or needed to be better. And so
How are you different now than before you started going through therapy?
That's a great question. I will tell you, I saw my first therapist when I was about 10 years old. So it's hard to remember that far back. But no, as an adult, I think like being able to contextualize things in your life that were stuck in your head, but you weren't sure why. I recently was thinking about an 8th grade math teacher that I had for like no reason, as far as I could tell. And the longer I sat with it, the more I realized that he was kind of one of the first teachers who taught this class of students that it was okay for boys to laugh at girls and that girls should expect to be laughed at as part of their education. Because we did a math game one day in his class. It was a boys versus girls game, and he went out on the blackboard and wrote a scoring tee. And on the one side, he wrote boys. And then on the other side, he wrote the weaker sex. Come on. Jeez. And all of the boys were like, oh, they were like banging on the desk. This is the funniest thing they've ever seen. And all the girls were like, because we didn't know how do you know, none of us were raised to be like, that's bullshit, man. We were all raised to just be like, I guess that's okay. And we kind of had to like filter this feeling of embarrassment and being like basically punched by our teacher in front of the whole class and kind of just make ourselves an accessory to it, because the other alternative, which was to stand up and say like, the hell are you thinking, man? How old are you? Grow up. It was too confrontational for most girls to be taught how to resolve conflict. So what I ended up doing was I just picked my chair up and I took it to the doorway of the classroom and I sat it down in the doorway with my back to the class, and I sat there and he was like, come back into class. And I didn't move. I just sat there, 12 years old, and until he erased it and wrote girls over it. And
so he knew.
Oh, he knew. But I've been thinking so much about that, because I wonder when he looks back on that incident, if he even remembers it, like, let's be honest. I wonder when he looks back on that incident, if he sees it as a moment that he overstepped and needed to walk it back, or if he sees it as a moment that I overstepped and he needed to compromise in order to like wrest control of his class back.
Do you think that part of the growth and the confidence that you have to a certain extent is temperament? I mean, there's some temperaments, that are very outgoing and some that are more reflective. There's the shy, there's the introvert. Do you think temperament has anything to do with that in terms of, being a woman who's able to successfully navigate life?
I think temperament is certainly part of it. I think not as much a part as privilege, as the number of privileges that you're afforded. The fact that I'm white and able-bodied, I'm married, I had the privilege of an education. I have the privilege of being, middle class. All of those things, I think, are far more impactful than my personality or my temperament. I certainly think like having a good attitude is a great thing, but it's really easy to have a good attitude when you're straight, white, cis, healthy, able-bodied, native-born, English speaker, all of these things that people can't go after you for. There's basically one thing people can go after me for, and it's my sex, and I hate it, and I wish they would stop. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who approach conflict differently, whose lives have been much more difficult than mine in a lot of different ways. You know, the intersections of various identities have made it so that not only are they hated for being a woman, they're also hated for being queer, and they're also hated for being Black. And so those identities are kind of inextricable and enmeshed with each other, and make that life. It's like, you know, the old video game metaphor. I am playing, like John, I would say you're probably playing the video game at the easiest setting. I am playing the video game at maybe the second easiest setting. And that queer Black woman we were just talking about is playing it at a much harder setting, because there are typically fewer resources afforded to her, fewer second chances, fewer lives given to her in this video game metaphor, right? And so as much as I love celebrating progress and celebrating work, I always think it's so important to contextualize it in, like, I wasn't born on third base, but I was probably born on first base. I was born on first base, maybe second.
So what were you doing before you got married, and how did you meet your husband?
I met my husband in college at Tulane in New Orleans, and it's so funny. We probably would not have hit it off if we hadn't met like right when we did, because he was this very kind of, I won't say emo, but he had just come back from a year in France. He had like long hair, and he was wearing linen pants, and he was a French and philosophy major. And I was studying theater, and I was in a sorority, and I was kind of this, and I was the recruitment chair of my sorority. I was like very rah-rah sorority, and he did not like sorority girls, and I did not like guys who didn't like sorority girls. So that's fucking stupid. And then we just met at the exact right time. And when we first met, I was an actress and a freelance writer, and I also tutored students on the side to pay the bills. Oh man, I worked a bunch of different jobs to pay the bills. When you're an actress and a freelance writer in New York, it's like.
Well, so did you get married? I mean, how long did it take to get married, and were you able to?
Got married after 6 years together.
Okay.
And we've been married now. I think this is our 10-year anniversary this year. So
congratulations.
10 years, thank you. And before I was, a mom and writing about parenting and feminism and raising good humans and all of that, I worked for Living Social for a while. I worked for Nordstrom for a while. I mean, listen, I majored in theater and creative writing. There was no way I was ever gonna make a living on those majors. So I kind of resigned myself to working jobs and not careers.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When it comes time to actually making that decision of, this is the person I'm going to be with, to make that kind of a commitment, how daunting was that decision, and how did you discern, this is the one?
That's an interesting question. I think he was someone that I could fight with in a way that didn't demean either of us. We could disagree very strongly with each other, and there was never a sense that one of us was judging the other for that disagreement. I think we both care a lot about continuing to learn and grow throughout our lives. And so having someone who shared that value with me of like, I need a partner. And by partner, I mean someone who's going to hold me accountable and not let me become the worst version of myself. And he wants that too. So I think that was a really big pro in the yes column.
Was there a lot of trial and error in terms of relationships before this guy came along?
Yes, there were.
Is that a yes?
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of trial and error. I dated. I often will say to my husband, that Carrie Fisher line from When Harry Met Sally, promise me I will never be out there again. I don't ever want to go back out. But I feel lucky that I'm not like in a marriage that I feel like I need to escape from or like settle for, in order to avoid being out there again.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing because you're actually working on something now. I think a screenplay and a book.
Yes,
Talk a little bit more about what you're actually, in addition to your blog,
yeah,
you got a real serious project going on.
I do. I have a serious project. I have a book that I'm kind of finishing up the proposal right now, which I'm really excited about. And it's such a timely topic because of COVID and what we've kind of seen as families have become kind of more self-contained worlds. It is about bringing feminism inside the home, as we were talking about earlier, like creating that private, like intimate shift toward feminism, toward inclusive feminism and empathy, not just in public spaces where we're worried that HR is watching or someone's got a camera phone out, but truly inside your home, inside your heart, in your bedroom. What does it look like to need feminism in those spaces, and what gifts can it give? Not just our families, but our culture as a whole, if we start to really demand that of ourselves and our partners and loved ones.
So now you have an agent. So, I mean, this is this is actually going to get published, right?
Dude. I mean, hopefully. It is. I'm really excited for it. And not a day goes by that I'm not also super nervous about totally fucking it up. I think I always just keep returning to the fact that this is something that I am an authority on. Okay, like feminism in our intimate spaces. This is my wheelhouse. So I'm really excited to write the book. I think it is a conversation. I think it's like the next level of the conversation that we've been having about, as you said, the Me Too movement, the need for more inclusion and gender equity. I do think the next step is internalizing that. So I'm pumped. I'm pumped to work really hard on it for a while still.
Is there a working title?
Busted.
Explain that.
Essentially the central premise is that sexism and misogyny have snuck into our homes, families, and intimate relationships, and it's time to bust it. It's time to bust it out of there, man. We have settled, both men and women, non-binary folks. Everyone has been settling for this kind of low-key, under-noticed, unquestioned misogyny and gender inequity, among other forms of kind of unaware bias that we all hold. So I'm really excited to like bust it.
Okay, but doesn't this run the risk of further antagonizing things?
No.
Why not?
Because pointing out an inequity does not create the inequity. So,
well, but it can solidify someone else's position in sort of in an intransigent way, couldn't it?
Sure, but if that person's position can be solidified by me saying, "Hey, I'm sick of being shit on," then that person wasn't going to be on my team anyway. I am not responsible for converting people who have dug their heels in against my humanity. Let me show you something that is very important to me. I have like a stack of little inspiration. So this is a piece of art, and I will send you the link to the art student who wrote this. Okay. One of her art teachers told her that she needed to dial down the feminism in her art. And so she made this. And so there are two settings for feminism. One is raging feminist, and the other is complicit in my own dehumanization. So if I have to choose between those two, I choose raging feminist. And if me advocating for my humanity and the humanity of all of these other people is so distasteful to you, you were never on my fucking team to begin with. So go grow up on your own time and come back to me when you're like half woke. Well,
but don't you want your book to at least help to do the awakening?
Sure, I would love to, but I am not, your mom, man. Like this is not, I have absolutely no desire to coddle people, not least because it's not particularly my style, but also because I think it disrespects people to believe they need to be coddled. if you are only in favor of gender equity, if you have to be flattered and pampered and thanked and given cookies all the way through your work to make this world a little bit more friendly to women, what are you demanding? What labor are you demanding of the women around you in order to say that you'll be on their team?
Okay, now, but here's for a woman to be as outspoken as you're suggesting that she should be, and I'm not saying that what you're suggesting is wrong. Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm saying I'm not advocating for any personality type. I'm just saying that for me, my choice is to advocate for myself and let the chip forward.
And so I guess when I'm hearing in my head someone, you know, a woman who's a little deferential saying, you know, I don't want to be this kind of person because that will sabotage my career.
That's a shame. And it's grotesque that women have to make those kinds of choices, right? This choice is not a way to live. This is not.
I'm going to put you up full. There you go.
Yeah, this is not the dream. This is the reality. So I am not writing a how-to book in any way. What I am writing about is the lived reality of a lot of women who face misogyny, even from loving partners, even in loving homes, not because, again, they married a dick, not because their kids are dicks or their parents are dicks, but because misogyny is the brine that we're all pickled in. None of us is a cucumber. We are all pickles. I'm a pickle. I have internalized misogyny that I am working out constantly. There are women I don't like for no reason. Let's unpack that. You know what I mean? But I think, you know, when it comes to that woman, I'm not telling any woman that shit. Okay, so here's how you do it. You march up to him and you shove him into the chair and you say, I'm not your pot roast tonight, Stephen. No, that's not. What I'm talking about is truly that like kind of really nuanced, internalized discussion about where are the places in your home, in your family, with your loved ones, where you are unfulfilled or unhappy or undermined. And
so your target audience is other women?
Correct.
Okay.
Predominantly. But I mean, in the same way that Rebecca Traister's Good and Mad was predominantly about women's anger, are men able to read that and glean some really important information? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because any book about feminism, feminism is for men and women, right? Like anti-racism is for all races, because these biases and this bigotry hurts all of us. You know, when you talk about violent men, they are hurt by patriarchy because from a very young age, men are taught that feelings are shameful and weak and that their value as human beings, in the same way that my value as a human being is dependent on my ability to please others and be nice and easy to be around, their ability to be valuable is based on how alpha they are. Do they win the room? Are they the most important guy there? Are they the strongest guy there? Are they the most aggressive guy there? And that is an incredibly toxic mindset to have, because then you don't have any internal worth. The only way that you can assert your worth as a human being is by crunching down on somebody else.
But those are the people who are in control, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I don't think anybody should be in control of everybody, but just for shits and giggles, I'd love to see like somebody who is the polar opposite in identity from the people who have always been in control. Can we get like a non-binary, queer, disabled, trans, woman of color or person of color to just run everything for like 20 years, and we'll just see where it shakes out. I think it would be good.
Well, and the interesting thing that we have now, and the time that you're writing this book, you know, we have a president who is probably the epitome of everything that you probably it's the antithesis of everything you would value, you know, in a man. So here's my question: what's the Trump effect long term? What kind of damage has been done, and how much is it going to take to turn that around?
A catastrophic loss of faith in government. I mean, is the first thing that.
And let me put an addendum on there as well. Explain to me why there are so many women who are in favor of Trump.
White women, yes, there are a number of white, typically non-college educated, but many college educated women who voted for Trump in 2016. And the majority of white women voted for Trump in 2016, which I think speaks predominantly to the power adjacency that white women have been accustomed to in this country, because we birth white men, we marry white men, we love white men, we cook for white men, we work alongside white men.
Well, they also didn't like Hillary.
They sure didn't. That's that internalized misogyny that we're talking about, right? So when, faced with the choice, a white woman is a woman, which means that voting for Trump should be against her best interests, right? Because he's a raging misogynist. I mean, just an angry hippopotamus misogynist, right? But she's also white, and white supremacy and patriarchy go hand in hand. And so it is much easier. If I had to choose between my two identities, white person or woman, and if I had to make a choice based on which one would give me more power, I would identify with the white team, not the woman team, right? And so you often see white women voting with their race rather than their sex, which is a shame and is, the result of being brought up in white supremacy and patriarchy, and led to believe that white men are going to protect us and have our best interest at heart. And that has definitely been true throughout history.
Are you going to talk about the Trump effect in your book?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about politics a little bit. It's hard to say. I mean, yes, I'm going to talk about predominantly kind of how patriotism, and like how the 2016 election really drove a wedge in a lot of families. It is devastating to discover that someone you love, and who loves you, also voted for someone who thinks you're rape bait, or thinks your friends are thugs, or shouldn't be allowed to go to the bathroom where they want to go to the bathroom, or adopt a child. It's fucking gutting. It's fucking gutting. And it makes, people say, oh, let's not talk politics. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Let's not talk politics. This is my life. This is my loved one's life. So it's such a luxury to be able to opt out of these conversations and say, I don't talk about politics. Well, I talk about politics because politics talks about me, because politics wants in my body. Politics wants in my friends' education systems. Politics wants in their bathrooms, in their bedrooms, in their families. Like, I don't have the luxury of opting out of politics. Now, that being said, a lot of women do opt out of those conversations, again, because they're kind of voting along race lines rather than sex lines. So it is, for me still, like, it is a choice. I could choose not to talk about politics, because even, the example I gave of politics wants in my body, middle and upper class white women have always been able to get abortions. This is not going to be a problem for me personally. This is a war on poor communities, poor women, and predominantly women of color. So that's that.
Whoa. Tell me more about the screenplay that you're working on. Is that going to be similar? Is this going to be an adaptation of it?
I will talk less about the screenplay because it is I'm wrestling with it right now. But
those are hard. Screenplays are hard.
Screenplays are very, very hard. And I have been really, really lucky to be plugged into an amazing working group with screenwriting. I think, so my screenplay is about a woman who, I'm trying to like not give it all away. Clearly, you don't have a long line yet. It's about a woman who starts over and is asking herself what she deserves. So,
yeah, that's pretty vague. Okay, fair enough.
I want to give you plot points in case I write out the Dalmatian or something,
Exactly. How are you doing both of these simultaneously? Sort of working on them both at the same time? And Are you farther along with the book proposal than the
Yes.
screenplay?
Yeah, the book proposal is definitely my number one priority right now. The screenplay is it's a passion project for sure. It's a story that I really, really want to tell. I think.
What's the genre? What's the genre going to be?
I'd say it's a drama.
Okay.
It's a drama. Maybe.
Now, do you have an agent for this as well? Same agent?
I have a manager for this.
Okay.
Actually,
how did you?
My agent can do both.
Okay. Well, how did you get your agent? How does one do that?
So I did the Millennial Secret, John.
What's that?
Do you remember when The Secret was a thing? It's that book with like the seal on it, and there was this misty woo woo. Please don't at me for calling The Secret misty woo woo.
But The Secret. Okay, The Secret.
So the whole premise is that you put your desires out into the universe, you declare them, and then the universe will bring them to you, right?
Right.
Roughly. So I did the millennial version of The Secret, which is I wrote on Facebook that I would and my agent reached out and said, "Do you have representation yet?" And I said, "Nope, I sure don't." And the relationship started. And she was really, she's been a mentor and a friend for a couple of years now, and has just been such an incredibly generous activist and such a source of information, because I truly am in so many ways a noob, like stumbling my way through this process. And so I can just call her and text her the stupidest questions that, anybody who has even watched a movie about publishing should know. And she's incredibly kind and generous. So I love her. I love her very much.
I could talk to you for another hour, and I'd love to, but I hope we'll be able to do this again, especially when your book comes out.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything I'm not asking about that you feel strongly about that we should touch on?
Not right now. I think to anybody who's watching this, I know that we all had a big anti-racism moment a couple months ago, right? And we were all yelling about how Black Lives Matter and buying the books and seeking out the Black small businesses to give our money to. And I would just like to say, even though maybe the cameras have walked away from the protests a little bit, and even though, the news cycle has moved on in a lot of ways, Black lives still matter. And you do still have a responsibility, because your responsibility began when you became aware. So you do still have the responsibility to work on making this world a better place for you, for your kids, and then for everybody else. So I think, read the books, keep buying from Black businesses. Anti-racism is not ever acquired. You got to keep working on it every single day, but do it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. Like, reclaim your humanity, reclaim it. It's there for you.
Whoa. Her name is Katie Anthony. We've been one-to-one with her. Katie, this has been so much fun. I hope we'll be able to do this again.
Yes,
Thanks very much. Okay. We'll talk again.